Today, let's talk about one of the most incredible places in all of South Korea, the Gamcheon Culture Village in Busan. At first glance, you just see this absolutely breathtaking splash of color on a hillside. But behind all that beauty is a story of transformation that is just wow. I mean, just look at this place. It gets called the Santorini of Korea and even the Machu Picchu of Busan. And you can totally see why, right? It's become one of the country's most iconic spots. You know, the way the houses are stacked like that? It actually came from a rule that no house should block the view of the one behind it. Pretty cool. But what's crazy is that this beauty, it's hiding a much, much tougher past. And that really brings us to the core question here. How on earth did a shantytown, literally built by refugees during the Korean War, turn into this global tourist magnet? So here's how we're going to break it all down. We'll start with its journey from hardship to hope. Then we're going to get lost in those amazing art-filled alleys. After that, we'll talk about the real people who live there, look at what the future holds for Gamcheon, and of course, I'll give you some tips if you want to go see it for yourself. All right, first up, let's rewind the clock and start at the very beginning. This is the story of how Gamcheon went from hardship to hope. So picture this, it's the 1950s. This place was basically a last resort, a makeshift camp for people fleeing the war, with no real sanitation or anything. Then by the 80s, while the rest of the country was modernizing, Gamcheon was just left behind. The population plummeted from 30,000 down to about 8,000. It was becoming a slum. But then in 2009, everything changed with something called the Village Art Project. That was the spark that started this whole transformation, turning it into the cultural hub that now gets over 2.6 million visitors every year. I mean, the contrast is just staggering. On one side, you have a refugee shantytown with no proper plumbing, and on the other, you have this celebrated open-air art gallery that's winning international awards. It's such a powerful example of how art and community can literally breathe life back into a place that was forgotten. So how did that actually happen on the ground? Well, that brings us right into our next section, exploring the art-filled alleys where all the magic is. Okay, pro tip. The absolute best way to experience Gamcheon is to grab one of these stamped maps. You can get it right at the tourist center for just 2,000 won. That's less than $2. It turns what could be a super confusing walk into a really fun scavenger hunt, making sure you hit all the best artworks and viewpoints. And what'll you find with that map? Oh man, so much. The most famous spot, for sure, is the statue of the Little Prince and the Fox. You will have to wait in line for a photo there. K-pop fans, you'll be on the lookout for the murals of BTS's Jimin and Jungkook. They're both from Busan. And then there are these quirky spots, like the stairs to see stars. It's 148 steps, and they say it's so steep you'll be seeing stars by the top. Plus, a bunch of the old empty houses have been converted into these really cool little art galleries. But here is something so important to remember while you're there. This isn't a theme park. It's a real village where people live. And that brings us to the human story behind the pretty pictures. And this is the secret sauce, you know? This wasn't some project forced on the village from the outside. The key to its success, as this quote says, was that the residents themselves were actively involved, working together with artists and the local government. That's why it feels so authentic. But that success, wow, has it come with a price? Get a load of this number. For every one resident living in Gamcheon, there are an estimated 144 visitors. 144 to 1. That just perfectly captures the enormous pressure that tourism has put on this tiny community. And this really shows you the double-edged sword of it all. I mean, on the one hand, tourism has brought in jobs, money, and a real sense of community pride. But on the other hand, the residents have to deal with constant noise, a total loss of privacy, and just streets packed with people right outside their front door. So, that leads us to the biggest challenge the village is facing right now. Let's talk about the future of Gamcheon and this really delicate balancing act between tourism and, well, everyday life. The new guiding principle here is sustainable tourism. Basically, the goal is to create a village where the residents' lives, the art, and the culture can all exist together, without the tourism part ending up destroying the very things people come to see. So what are they actually doing about it? Well, they're getting pretty creative. They plan to use 88 vacant homes for new things like living experience centers that show what life was like in the 50s and 60s, and even some unique places for people to stay overnight. But maybe most importantly, they're putting visiting hours on the residential areas. Tourists will only be able to go there between 9 a.m. and 6 p.m., which should give the residents some much-needed peace and quiet. All right, so if you're thinking, okay, I have to see this place, let's wrap up with some practical tips for planning your trip. Getting there is actually pretty easy with public transport. You just take the subway to Tosong Station, find exit 6, and right in front of the hospital there's a bus stop. You're looking for one of the little mini buses, either Sahawan 1, Segu 2, or Segu 22. They'll take you right up the hill to the village entrance. And when you're there, please just be a thoughtful visitor. Remember that people actually live there, so keep your voice down, don't just wander onto private property, and definitely no drones. Oh, and last thing, and trust me on this, wear comfortable shoes. Those hills are no joke. So I want to leave you with this final thought. Gamcheon is undeniable proof that art and community can create an absolute miracle. But the real test is happening right now. As it gets more and more famous, can this village protect its unique, authentic soul from being loved to death by its own incredible success? It's something to think about.